Hi everyone, Lemon and Lime here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Protomartyr album, Ultimate Success Today. This is the latest LP from post and art punk revivalists Protomartyr, a Detroit band that is now on their 5th full-length LP, out now via Domino Records. It's been about 3 years since the release of the band's last full-length LP, Relatives in Descent, my favorite record of theirs so far. There's certainly something about the band's downtrodden brand of Bad Seeds-esque sad punk that feels so urgent, so intense, and as nasty as the world that gave birth to it. Protomartyr's artistic evolution has been defined so far more by fine-tuning than great leaps and radical changes, with their post-punk style becoming less and less boilerplate over time. So I didn't go into Ultimate Success Today expecting a huge difference in sound, but I do sense some subtle changes in approach that haven't exactly resulted in the band's best material yet. But for the most part, Ultimate Success Today sounds exactly like the Protomartyr that fans have known and loved for however many years you've been aware of them. Aesthetically, this record checks all of the usual boxes, and on top of it adds some hulking climaxes of noisy instrumentation, some sax and cello and flute here and there as well. But the way the band is formulating the songs on this record, it feels a lot more linear this time around, as if the idea behind multiple tracks here is to harp on a single phrase or groove and intensify it until it becomes a hulking mass, which, hey, that's literally what some of my favorite bands of all time do. The issue for me, though, is that I don't necessarily think Protomartyr is the best at it, because there are multiple moments on this thing that just leave me scratching my head, like with the Day Without End intro. The more this track's eerie, ringing guitar leads and driving 16th note hi-hats lose control, the less gratifying it becomes miraculously. And while I'm aware this is an intro track, a starter, a taster, the abrupt ending still makes the song feel like the build progression it undergoes is just for nothing at the end. Following this, we have the track Processed by the Boys, which does feature some of the most cacophonous and exciting passages on the entire record, but what is the rest of this instrumental? The shrill and shimmering reverb-heavy guitar chords that sync up with the pronounced drumming on the track sound like something out of a Grizzly Bear song, but dragged out to the point where it gets really tiresome. So that's the start of the record, and the end of the LP can get pretty underwhelming too. There is Bridge and Crown, which is a slow burner in 3/4, whose tedious progression and pacing only seems to reveal more drab guitar leads and super shrill chords. Then, as the song moves forward and the band begins to fill in the gaps in the instrumental, the whole thing just sounds more and more mushy. Then with Worm in Heaven, we have a very forlorn closer whose instrumental I think could have used a little something extra, especially in the first half. The greatest selling point of the song ends up being frontman Joe Casey, who pulls off a super theatrical performance packed with some of the most poetically tragic lyrics on the entire record. For me, many of the performances sit in a weird middle ground where they're not hectic enough to be a thrilling mess, but not tight enough to be conventionally appealing either. And while this may not ruin a given song, it does leave me wanting more. Take, for example, the track Modern Business Hymns. The driving dance beat combined with the swaggered but sloppily strummed guitar chords and awkward leads sounds like the Strokes if they were decked out in goth attire and high out of their minds. I do gotta give credit where it's due though. There are some points where the band really does hit the nail on the head. I Am You Now is a pretty fiery track with its driving floor toms, mega abrasive guitar chords that hit like a shock to the system. It's like I'm being just woken up with a defibrillator. Joe Casey also on this track sounding like he's on the verge of a manic episode with his dramatic shouted poetry. Then as the track cools down, the band actually moves through a series of very incremental but engaging and enjoyable progressions that bring things to a really gratifying climax. The pacing is there, the subtlety is there, it's great. Then the Aphorist sees the band visiting somewhat familiar territory with a grim, dirgy ballad, very despondent moment in the track list that hits with an emotional punch and a sonic 1-2, as the band immediately transitions in the second half into this screaming, ghoulish instrumental instrumental bridge and solo passage. We also have the absolutely sinister June 21st, which features some extra vocals, I believe, from Nandy Rose, Half Waif, which certainly adds to the song's frightening tone, especially on its icy hook. Summer in the city, bring me no. Also, the pulsating, tangy guitar leads create quite the groove with the drums on this track, and I love the way all of this very quiet, subtle instrumentation is droning away in the background on these verses, getting a bit more intense as it goes along. It sounds like it's there, but it's also not. It's kind of maddening. Then the song Tranquilizer, another highlight for me, is anything but tranquil. It's actually the nastiest sounding song on the entire record, arguably. The nocturnal sax leads and disgustingly distorted bass lines combined with Joe Casey's voice that has this very springy, very immediate delay on it. There's something about the start of this song. It sort of sounds like a Cramps record. Then, almost without warning, the band breaks into some of the noisiest walls of sound on the entire LP. Cool, they saved some of the most abrasive sounds for the second half. Though I will say the verse beyond this point does sound like the group is kind of killing time to put you into a lull so they can hit you with that wall of noise once again, but I don't know, it's worth another go around, I suppose. And that's kind of it in terms of highlights for me, sadly. Granted, the other tracks on the LP aren't terrible, but I did expect more from this thing in terms of performances and songwriting, which arguably were better on Relatives and Age and Intellect, even some portions of Undercolor of Official Right, where the band's amateurishness was at least an endearing factor. Meanwhile, Ultimate Success Today feels unkempt without an explanation. Even though partially I can appreciate the band trying to change things up a little instrumentally this time around, along with the increased focus on socio-political topics in the lyrics, these respectable changes didn't result in one of my favorite records in the band's catalog, sadly. Feeling a decent 6 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, music, Protomartyr, forever.